My name is Judy Lynn Cole. I'm a sonic researcher. What I do is I study the ancient art and text. I decipher the codes. I build the codes in sound. I have them built in sound. We run the sound through oscilloscopes, the K.I.S laser, or the simoscope, and we photograph or film the results. And we also use these same frequencies. I'm also one of the founders of the Ringing of the Rivers project. And we've been guided as a group to basically use scent, sound, sacred geometry, and intention to charge crystals, and then seed those crystals into bodies of water all over the world. We've been seeding with the crystals since 2002. And last November we launched the cetacean phase. We now have, in our project, we have a sailboat named Spirit that has joined our crew, our new chief engineer, and we say chief because it has a very natural native sound. Our chief engineer is David Tex Houston, and he's the owner of Spirit, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we have these sound codes going into San Francisco Bay. By teaching the codes to the dolphins and the whales and other cetaceans, what happens is the water sonication, cleaning up water, usually only happens in the sonar range. I feel like this is just really strange. I think I want to start over.
No, that was good.
Is that okay? The Ringing of the Rivers project, I should have put in about the Ringing of the Rivers project. The Ringing of the Rivers project uses scent, sound, sacred geometry, and intention to sound charge crystals, which that's phase 1 of our project, and that phase is continuing through phase 2. The crystals have been seeded all over the world since 2002 by people who have participated in our ringing ceremonies. Each participant takes 28 crystals. They keep one as a commemorative stone for themselves, and then they take 3 sets of 9 out of that 27, and they seed a different body of water somewhere around the world. We have seeded, we're going to be seeding Newfoundland. We'll be seeded in September of this year. We've had seedings in Titicaca, we've had seedings in Brazil, we've had seedings in Germany, England, France, Australia, Canada, North America. I'm sure there's more, but those are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. What we're doing is we're laying literally crystal grid lines through the rivers, because our project isn't just about cleaning up the rivers of the world. It's also about cleaning up the rivers of life that run within us, which is our blood, and the rivers of love that are to flow between us. But the water purification is very much a large part of our project. It's about honoring water and recognizing the value of water, and that water needs to be respected. Water to us is within us. It's 70-75% of our bodies and 90-95% of our brains. So water sonication, specifically, I've been told by water scientists that this only works at the sonar range. Well, what we're doing is the sound codes that we're teaching to the cetaceans are these same frequencies that we've been charging the crystals with. So those crystals are tuned to these specific fundamental frequencies, and these specific fundamental frequencies is a group of 18 frequencies that there's been a lot of research done on them by a lot of different people all over the world. There's literally thousands of us that are looking at these specific frequencies as basically a microtonal musical system, but also as a system that ties in with human and earth mass harmonics. So when you work with these frequencies are hitting unified field equations that tie in with the earth mass harmonics or the human harmonics. Specifically, according to Dan Shaw, who wrote the book Vortex Maps, he says that the underlying math to lay out a grid around the earth is 3 cubed times 2. 3 cubed times 2 is 54. 3 cubed is 27 times 2 is 54. The major difference tone in these specific 18 frequencies we have a major difference tone of 54 between six different numbers to each other, and we have a major difference tone of 27 on the outside of the grid. If I had a chart, I could show you.
So, tell us a little bit about the laser and the oscilloscope and the work you've been doing with that.
Okay, what we do is when we started recording the sound codes that were given to us to charge crystals and to teach to the cetaceans or dolphins, when we were given these codes, we started trying to look at the patternings of them, and what we found is that people really felt good when they listened to them. I mean, we had one gentleman who had not been able to sleep for more than 20 minutes after he'd been diagnosed with cancer, and he was really struggling with the diagnosis, and for 4 months he'd been unable to sleep more than 20 minutes at a time, and he was choosing to do hospice at home, and his wife was at the point of collapse, and he was at the point of collapse. And I said, well, would you try out these CDs? And we gave him our first 2 CDs. We gave him the Transformation series, which was our actual ringing ceremony, and we gave him the Navigation series, which is actually the difference tones that appears in the patterning. And he listened to one of them twice and one of them once. And the first one he listened to, he told his wife to turn that stuff off because it hurt his ears and it wasn't bluegrass. But she talked him into listening to it again, and by the time he had listened to one twice and the other one once, he was able to sleep 4 hours at a time. And we had a big joke about it because she would put that on and he would go to sleep and he could sleep 4 hours at a time. And he lived for like 3.5 more years. But, so we said it was just because it was bluegrass and he was just zoning out. But it worked as a sleep aid in his particular case. And then I went down to Dr. Tom Eirich's. I got a phone call from a friend of mine who had gone to work for Dr. Eirich to help him. Dr. Eirich had purchased a sound bed. And Bill called Tom and I and said, can you come down and, I know you're familiar with the Baytar, can you come down and look at this piece of equipment and tell us how it works? So we went down and looked at the equipment, and sure enough, it was a very similar setup where it had tactile transducers along the bed. And it had where you could actually run 3 different medium sources, like 3 different CDs at the same time, and target it for which speakers you wanted it to go to. So we were very interested in it, and he asked could we help him run a test series. And so we said, okay, we'll line out the test series, work it out with Dr. Eirich, and we'll come down and test it. And when we got down there, they had a phenomenal, what I call a representative sample of people with the same or similar emotional disorders. We scrapped our entire plan and ended up literally testing the people to see what was their subjective experience of being on the sound bed. And it was an interesting sample because some of the people were on medication, some of them ate very healthy and exercised, and some of them did nothing. And it was interesting to see how each group responded to basically being on the sound bed. So we came back, and it was 2 days later. I knew that I would get, I was doing a lot of juicing at the time, and so I knew that it would be very, very powerful to be in the room. So I was outside of the room, but there were no sound baffles on the walls. And I was outside of the room doing my part of the testing. We had a whole team that came in and did this, participated in this, and we had about 30 people that went through and tested the bed. And I'm about 25 feet outside of the room where I'm doing my part of the work. And I came home, and I think it was 2 days later, 3 days later, my partner woke up in the middle of the night, and he's like, Judy, did you wet the bed? And I'm just like, oh. And he's like, oh my gosh, you're on fire. I developed such a high fever, heat to burn off the bacteria that I believe, my theory is that the body no longer needed. I had been exposed to so many frequencies and combinations of frequencies, and I literally just hit a total detox. And I ran a very high fever, and I actually had burns that had been suppressed for 21 years that literally expressed out of my leg. The identical patterning, And then when I couldn't get it, I could feel it. It was like my foot was on fire. And 3 weeks later, but I couldn't get it out, I called a homeopath, and she suggested what I needed to take. And that got rid of the intense fire feeling, and it got into the itching. But my minerals weren't right, so I knew I needed wheatgrass grown in seawater. So I called because I had friends that were growing wheatgrass in seawater for their own consumption. So I called and said, when are you all juicing? And they said, we're juicing tonight. And I said, I need some help. I'm coming down. And so I jumped in the car. I drove 96.3 miles, which one of the numbers that we're working with is 963. And it's 96.3 miles from my door to her door. And I drove down there, walked in the door, and her husband's standing there extracting wheatgrass. And she says, you need a high-potency petrolatum. She goes and gets the homeopathic remedy because he's a licensed homeopath. And she goes and gets that and gives that to me. And I said, what are you doing with that pulp? And he looked at me and he says, well, we put that in our compost. And I said, can I borrow it? And he says, for what? I said, I've got this foot's on fire. I need to pack this foot in nutrition because my body's taking the nutrition. I need to get it to the foot. And he says, what? And his wife was just right on it. She's pulling baggies out of the kitchen drawer and starts slopping this wheatgrass pulp in there, and she runs out to the garden and grabs organic dandelion roots, dirt and all, runs it through the extractor. And he says, Judy, your foot's not even pink. I said, that foot is on fire. It is on fire. And I said, it's just like when I first burned it. I had second-degree burns is what was coming out of my body. And we packed my foot and then packed the pulp of the wheatgrass on top of it. And then we poured the dandelion juice and more wheatgrass juice on top of that. He hands me a 10-ounce glass of wheatgrass juice, which I don't recommend people start with, but I needed it at the time. I downed this, and in 1 hour and 20 minutes, my foot turned fire engine red. The blisters blew through the top, opened, drained, and healed over. And we're going, where is a camera when you need it? And that was when we got really interested in sound. But it was the experience of seeing how nutrition and homeopathy and essential oils applied with the sound really moved me through a very deep cellular memory release. But I had been doing the nutrition for years. What I was not getting was that little extra push. That little extra push.